Welcome to the EchoJunction podcast.
Hello everybody, thank you so much for joining me for episode number 122 of the EchoJunction podcast. We're talking social and digital. My name is Adam Fraser. I'm the founder of EchoJunction, and if you're interested in the strategic landscape of social media, digital marketing, and marketing technology, this is very much the podcast for you. Have a fantastic returning guest to bring you today, ladies and gents. It's Mr. Joe Pulizzi, back for a third time on the podcast. Great honor to host Joe again. Joe is back this time talking about his new book, Killing Marketing, which he authored with Robert Rose. Joe and Robert both working together at the Content Marketing Institute. I'm sure will be well known to many in the audience. And Joe's new book, all about the central premise of using owned media platforms as a central plank in your holistic marketing strategy. So always great value to have Joe on the podcast. Hope you enjoy the conversation. I know I certainly did. Thanks for your support, and I will check in with you at the end. I'm delighted to welcome back to the EchoJunction podcast, Joe Pulizzi. Joe is founder of the Content Marketing Institute and an author, keynote speaker, and many, many other things. Joe, very big welcome back.
Adam, thank you so much. This is my third time, I believe, correct?
We are calling this the trilogy episode.
So hopefully people stayed with us the first two times and they're willing to listen through a third time.
Yeah. Now there is a rumor, I can't confirm it, that Robert Rose has already been on this podcast for a third time.
Oh, jeez. He always one-ups me. I'm so tired of him. I cannot wait till I don't have to work with him anymore. No, I love he is my good friend. Absolutely love it. I'm sure that was a great podcast as well. We'll have to do a little bit better though.
Absolutely. Look, Joe, a very, very big welcome back. I will link up our first two conversations. I can't believe I guess it's almost 2 years ago we chatted about Content Inc., which we will touch on again, no doubt, in today's conversation. And then a year ago, very opportune, we talked about conferences, which I thought was quite an interesting topic, a bit different, but I loved going under the bonnet of Content Marketing World, which is again coming up this year. So we'll touch on that as well. So look, Joe, I am sure many of the listeners know all about you. I hope they listened to the first two podcasts, but we do have new audience members coming in all the time. So maybe for those that don't know too much about you, can you give us a bit of an introduction and tell us a bit about your backstory?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in the content marketing industry, if you will, for almost 20 years now. It's hard to believe. I started at a large media company called Penton Media and oversaw their content marketing initiative. So we would do content programs for usually large business-to-business brands. Decided to branch out on my own in 2007. That initiative became what's known today as the Content Marketing Institute. We launched Content Marketing World in 2011. So this will be our 7th year of Content Marketing World, and Killing Marketing coming out here in the next actually, when people listen to this right now, it's being launched. That'll be my 5th book. This one's co-authored with Robert Rose, and I speak all over the world trying to evangelize the practice of content marketing and get people to think a little bit differently about how they communicate with their customers. And I've just enjoyed the ride. I've been having a great time. And it's been a blessing to be able to, launch this thing and see it through and see a number of people from all around the world kind of get behind the concept of content marketing. And thank goodness I don't have to sell it as hard as I used to, because when I first started and would talk about content marketing, people would usually shut off or they'd fall asleep or they're like, well, I don't know what you're talking about. But now it seems that most organizations are doing some form of content marketing, and now we just have to improve upon what we started.
Yeah. Now, look, great summary, Joe. And look, we'll touch on Content Marketing World maybe at the end of the show, and that's a nice link, because as people listen to this, it will be this week, if that makes sense, that the conference is kicking off. But look, I want to dive into your book. It was great to have you on first time around talking about Content Inc. As you say, this is your 5th book, Killing Marketing. I guess first question, Joe, I was lucky enough, finally had Mark Schaefer on the podcast about 5 or 6 weeks ago, and we talk about, I think he's written 7 books, certainly 6 or 7, and he talked through the kind of sequencing and the evolving story over all of his books, and he kind of joined the dots in this kind of master plan over a decade of books. I'm just wondering, this is book number 5. Are you sort of evolving and continuing to tell your story? Is each book kind of stood in its own right?
Oh, that's it. Well, I'll tell you what, Adam, there's definitely no master plan. They do link together. I think it's just because of maybe my maturation or how the industry has changed. But Get Content, Get Customers, which was first came out in early 2008, that was just like, what the heck is this thing? What's going on? What's content marketing? Here's some case studies. Here's some people doing this thing. And now moving on to Killing Marketing. I mean, Robert and I really believe that the future of the marketing department is as a profit center. And it's really taking content marketing to the next level. A lot of people don't like that concept. They're like, you have enough to do in marketing, whether to think about it should be a standalone profit center. But I think that's the future. I think content as a business model is really something that we need to start thinking about. But my personal goal, Adam, has always been every 2 years to write a book. So as soon as I'm done, basically 2009 is officially when Get Content, Get Customers came out, Managing Content Marketing at 11, Epic Content Marketing was 13, and that was really for enterprise brands on how they could operationalize the practice of content marketing. And then you and I talked in 2015 about Content Inc. That was for small businesses and how they can use it even if you don't have a big budget, and what's the formula for getting this thing done, and of course driving revenue, if you will. And then Killing Marketing is all about it's the perfect placement for chief marketing officers, because we really feel that leadership in most organizations just still don't get it. I mean, they understand they want to create a lot of content, but they haven't put their arms around the practice. I mean, we're creating more content than we ever have before, and we're going to do the same next year and the same the year after that. But yet most organizations, they still don't have an idea of what the costs and revenues are associated with that. And at minimum, you need to get your arms around it. So I do feel it's sort of a good time to say, we really need to take a serious look at the marketing department in general, instead of just creating all kinds of content and do activity. We're doing a lot of activity, and we've got to come back and say, look, this really needs to be a strategic approach, and it could be bigger than we ever thought it could be. So let's pull back for a second, look at it strategically, and maybe you need to make some major changes in your organization. So that's the hope for the new book, is to get that in front of people that can make decisions and say, this is a thing. We really do have to start taking it seriously, which most organizations simply are not doing.
So, Joe, obviously won't repeat the entire 45-minute podcast we did on Content Inc., but if I'm summarizing, I hope correctly, Content Inc. was all about build an audience first, listen to the audience, understand your buyer persona, their pain points, their problems, and then sort of evolve your products and services to meet the needs that exist because you've built a community. And I think you said at the time, whilst it did have some application for larger enterprises, it was largely targeted at, I guess, the SME space. So is Killing Marketing similar thinking, but just sort of adapted, evolved, updated for enterprise?
You could probably make that case. I mean, Content Inc. was my most personal project, because you and I both read a lot of books about startups and how to start a business. And I always thought that there was this mentality that, we have to go out and create the greatest product in the world. And how many companies do that? How many individuals can do that? And usually you pivot anyways. So I was like, well, really the better way to do it is to build an audience that begins to know, like, and trust you. You understand the insights around that better than anyone else. And then because you do, and you understand that group better, then you can launch whatever products you want to. And then, of course, that's in Content Inc. We talk about all the examples of that happening. And yes, a larger company could take that and use that within a division, but it was really perfect for small business or for an entrepreneur that wants to start a company. I feel that there's no better way to start a company than going out and building an audience first and then wrapping products and services around it. Killing Marketing takes it to the next level, because we're actually, putting our flag into the ground and saying, you need to look at the marketing function completely different than you ever have before. You actually need to, I guess, ask the question, what if what we've been taught about marketing is incorrect? That our job as marketers, which I believe it's true, and Robert talks about this as well, is to make markets. That's what a marketer is supposed to do. And if our job is supposed to make markets, The best way to do that is to first build an audience and then be able to monetize that audience. And we talk about this in the book in 10 different ways. Most organizations, they're like, okay, well, we want to generate more sales. Okay, we'll build an audience around creating all kinds of content, whether that's podcast, video, blog series, whatever the case is, and we'll try to change their behavior in some way. By the way, that's fine, but I think it's limited. What if you built that relationship with that audience and could monetize it 2 ways, 3 ways, 5 ways, and up to 10 different ways? And I think that's the opportunity. And we see that happening with media companies. Actually, just a couple weeks ago, you saw that BuzzFeed came out and said, they're launching some slow cooker. Like, you can actually buy equipment for the kitchen, link it up to your smartphone, and they're selling this right now. And that's interesting, right? I mean, BuzzFeed is a media company. They have an audience, and they're saying, look, we're going to sell products to that audience. And I think a lot of media companies now have to do that because they're forced to. So I don't know if they have an edge, but they're basically at desperate times right now because they have to do this because advertising and subscriptions aren't going to cut it for them. And on the other side, it's like, what if we looked at that as brands? What if we said, oh, okay, this audience likes to do this, this, and this. Wow, I didn't realize this. Look at all this insight and research that we're getting. We could launch a number of new products that we've never thought of before. And I think people forget sometimes that when an organization launches, they don't sell the same products year after year. We keep changing the product mix, and understanding an audience better than anyone else will enable you to do that better than anyone else.
The whole media marketing fragmentation, brands as media as brands, product sales, it's getting blurry out there, Joe. And I do want to come back to that kind of, blurring in the future of what a brand looks like today, what a media company looks like today. But before we get into that, I guess there's one thing I'm interested in, Joe. You've, I suppose it's a bit of a Gary Vaynerchuk phrase about staying in your lane, but when you described your 4 previous works, pretty much anchored, your publishing background, clearly content marketing, the central premise. The title of this book is Killing Marketing. So are you kind of intentionally, it's good to get out of your comfort zone. Are you pushing the boundaries? Are you now kind of taking a whole of marketing approach, or you still see this in essence as a sort of content marketing book broadening outwards, if that makes sense?
It's funny you mentioned that. I mean, a lot of discussion went around the fact that content was not in the title of this book. It's the first one where you don't have content marketing of some kind in the title. And it's definitely deliberate because we're trying to get, most enterprises are putting the function of content creation and distribution in a little pocket in the organization down the hall. And okay, those are the content creators, and we need content for the sales team, and we need content for internal communication, and they need lots of content, but we're not thinking about it strategically. I believe now, I think that's where Robert and I are coming out with Killing Marketing and saying, this is something bigger. This is not just, we can create, because we can reach audiences directly now and we can create all this content and it doesn't cost as much as it used to cost. Great, we can go ahead and do this and it'll help the business. I think that's a short-sighted way to look at it. So why we came out and said, let's not put content in the title. This is marketing. And of course, we're not saying we want to kill the function of marketing. Robert and I we're as big a believers in the practice of marketing as anyone else out there. But I think that most organizations they're doing it wrong because we were taught that marketing was something limited. And now we really believe that marketing can be the business model that drives the organization, or thinking about marketing in a different way. And I'll give you, a quick example. We talk about this in the book is Arrow Electronics. A lot of people have never heard of Arrow Electronics. Fortune 119 company, $24 billion in revenue or something like that in 2016. They're sort of like the Amazon.com of selling electrical components. And they went out over the past 2 years and they purchased 51 different media properties. They are now the largest media company in the electronics industry. They reach 76% of all electrical engineers directly now. And by the way, they do it for profit. It is a profitable entity, if you will. And a lot of people look at that as, this is just kind of a fluke, or that company's strange, kind of like Red Bull. We always say, Red Bull can do Red Bull Media House because it's Red Bull. because it's different. They could do the whole thing with, give me wings and fly and risk taking and stuff like that. And that's different. Well, the case we're trying to make is no, those are the pioneers, if you will. But right now it is happening, and companies that actually start to look at their marketing in this way, building audiences, multiple lines of revenue, ultimately could be profitable. These are the most innovative companies in the world. These are the ones that are going to last. These are ones that are going to be the biggest. They're going to have the best relationships with their customers. And so, that's kind of the tack we're trying to make. And yeah, I mean, whether or not this is my last marketing book that I write or whatever the case is, or a swan song, I think it's a good way to go. And like, I don't know right now, Adam, how to one up this. Like, I don't know how to write another book after you say you're doing killing marketing. But I do think that we are maturing, if you will, in content marketing. And you're always thinking, what's next? I really do believe that this is what's next. And you'll have some chief marketing officers that are going to push it to the side and saying, oh, this is just another thing like search marketing or social media marketing. It's just another thing we have to have. It's just another check the box. Well, you can look at it that way, and I think you're limited, or you can look at it the way that Robert Rose and I are looking at it, and you can completely change the way you communicate with your customers, and you can drive lines of revenue that you never thought was possible.
It's so interesting, Joe, though. Once you broaden, like you say, the word content marketing not in the title, the word content not in the title, once you broaden it to, marketing, killing marketing, the whole function of marketing, I suppose, are you implicitly opening the 4 Ps, price, product, promotion? Clearly, your focus is on the marketing communications aspect of the piece, advertising and content creation, and I guess what's traditionally PR. Or are you saying, content should be the dominant factor in that broader suite of things, which still do holistically sort of contribute to the whole marketing function?
I believe that. Well, let's go back for a second. Let's look back at the way that marketing and communications departments are set up. We're pretty much this, and PR, if you will. We're pretty much set up exactly the same as we were 50 years ago. There's not actually a lot of difference, but yet everything has changed in that time period. The control has gone from big media companies and brands with big advertising budgets directly to the people. I mean, obviously, you have a 24/7 device with you at all times. You can ignore any piece of advertising you wish to, or any piece of communication. You really have to earn the right to communicate with somebody today. But yet we're set up exactly the same as we were. And that's what, as Robert and I went through this over and over, and we work with these enterprises from all over the world, and we look how they're set up, we're like, oh my goodness, they're set up around an interruption model. They're set up really around advertising, and still the most of what we do as enterprise brands, as brands of any size for the most part, we're still trying to interrupt our way there. We're still trying to advertise. And I'm not saying advertising is bad and you shouldn't do it. I think there will always be a place for advertising. But how have we not changed? How have we not adapted? And I mean, you probably see this as well as I do, where you go into a university and see what they're teaching about. I mean, they have media studies, and they have journalism, and you have marketing. And you know what the marketing books are? They're pretty much the same as they were 20 years ago. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, this is the way that we haven't evolved at all. So if you come out of university and you get put into some kind of a marketing department, what are you going to do? You're going to do exactly what you've learned and exactly what it's been set up. And it's like, okay, well, let's go find our target market and let's try to get their attention in some way and move them down the funnel and, get qualified leads and the whole thing. And that we'll just keep doing that over and over again unless somebody stands up and said, look, this, whether you want to call it content marketing or whatever, it doesn't matter to me. But if you say the ability to build an audience, and by the way, the content is not the asset, right? Anybody creates content. You don't say, what's the value of that media company? How many pieces of content did they create? No, that doesn't matter. What matters is that what's the buying behavior of the audience? That's where what begins. So the asset is your audience, and we get to that audience by creating valuable, relevant, compelling content over a consistent basis. So if we start to look at our business that way in pockets of audiences, and we can monetize those audiences in different ways, some products we have and some products we don't, we can look at everything differently, and we can see that, this is not what we We can sell more than what we're selling now. We can be more profitable. We can have the best customer relationships in the world because we see things a little bit differently. So I think, and that's why, if you go back to Content Inc., that's why it's easier for smaller businesses. They don't have the political issues, the red tape going on, because in a large company, and we found this firsthand, it's very hard to move the big ship. It's extremely difficult. So if you get a content champion in there, that's why if you get somebody that really believes in this, but they don't have executive support, they leave. Because you can't move it fast enough. So that's why small, innovative companies or companies that aren't tied to this is the way we've always done it, they're the ones that are going to win out on this, because I think something is happening and we're not talking about it. And the last thing I'll say, because I'm sort of rambling here, the last thing I'll say is, you mentioned media companies. The business model for media companies and brands of any size that sell products and services, it's exactly the same when it comes to this. It comes to building audiences and content. There's no different. There's 10 ways to drive revenues if you're a media company, and there's 10 ways to drive revenue if you're a products company. And it's like nobody's noticed this. We perceive such a difference in what media companies do versus what we do. But if you really look at the inherent business model underlying it, there's no difference. And if you accept that fact, it opens up so much possibility for your organization. The problem is most chief marketing officers, most senior executives, they were taught marketing. They were taught the 4 Ps. They were taught very traditionally. This is how we do PR. This is how we do communications. This is how we do marketing. And they never think that it actually is the same, that we actually have the power to communicate differently with our customers. And so what happens? Change doesn't happen. We see this cycle of dabbling, if you will, in content marketing. And I don't know if you can sense it, but it's frustrating. I get really frustrated what's going on, because you go on to these big companies, you get somebody in the organization that wants to do something, but they can't, because that's not the way we do things.
Now, look, Joe, it comes up on so many different aspects of the topics I talk about. The pure change management, the resistance to change, which humans naturally have, the vested interests, the kind of media marketing machine, and inverted commas, the way we've always done things. So there's no question in the aspect you're talking about, you're bumping up against that as well. There's a few things I want to unpack, Joe, but before I do, you mentioned, I love the Arrow Electronics example. I think most people would know the Red Bull example. There are a couple of other early movers or innovative players that you talk about in the book, maybe good examples of people starting to move in the direction effectively that you're talking about?
Yeah, well, I got a couple off the top of my head. So if you look at babycenter.com, babycenter.com is owned by Johnson & Johnson. So they reach, believe it or not, I think it's 45 million mothers around the world on a consistent basis, helping them figure out what the issues that we have to deal with around our children, our babies, whatnot. And it is a for-profit venture. A lot of people don't realize that. I mean, if you go to babycenter.com, you don't initially realize it's from Johnson & Johnson. Incredibly helpful site, and they're monetizing that in multiple ways, including the research behind it in order to launch new products that they've never thought of before. Sort of like Kraft Food and Family has done for years with their print magazine, as well as their craftrecipes.com. What's really interesting to me, though, this happened in late 2016, where Mondelez and Pepsi both came out at the same time, around the same time, and said, we are rethinking what marketing is supposed to do in organizations. And they actually launched content studios. And they said, when they, in the interview back and forth in the articles that I read, the leadership there said that a portion, if not a good majority of some of this content we're going to create is going to be self-sustaining and or profitable. That's a huge deal. Like, somebody looks at that and says, whatever, here's another brand going out there creating another content studio. We'll see what happens. But it's the first time that they said, no, we really think that we can be just like a media company. We can create content that's good enough that we can build audiences and generate revenues from that. So I think that we're starting to see this happen. And I think what really makes a difference here is you're not getting classically trained marketers in those positions. What you're seeing, and you saw this at Marriott firsthand. Marriott launched their content studio. and they went and hired David Beebe, who is a publishing media executive, to launch their studio. And they went from like nothing to over 100 people in their content studio. They do all kinds of content creation, and they're evolving in this model. And what they're hiring media people. They're hiring people that understand how to build audiences and how to create content consistently over time. And I think that really helps. So if you're going to do something like this, actually going and getting talent on board that understands how to build audiences and not just how to interrupt like we've done forever is a huge, huge deal. So we're starting to see it, Adam. It's going to happen. I don't know if it's going to be a year or 5 years. I always think that it should happen faster, but it takes longer. But I think that probably in your 7 to 10 year time period, we will perceive the brands as differently, like a New York Times versus a Microsoft or a Cisco Systems will perceive it differently, but the business models underlying how they're going to market are going to look exactly the same. I think that's what we're seeing now with BuzzFeed. Is BuzzFeed a products company because they're selling kitchenware now? Or are they a media company? Well, they're both. Is there Aero Electronics? What are they? Are they a media company? Are they a products company? Well, they're both. So I think you're going to start seeing that where the model has been so changed evolved in this manner in the past, over the next 5 to 7 to 10 years, that we'll only perceive differently because, that's a media company or that's New York Times, but really what we do is the same thing. And I think the quicker marketers can understand this, the more that we can make impact and change happen. Because to your point, change is the hardest thing. This is all about a change management issue.
And on the flip side, as you say, Joe, it's getting harder and harder to sort of, where does the definition start? What's a product company? What's a brand? What's a traditional media company? That whilst you've got, an increasing number of examples of brands starting to create, act like media companies and build profit centers or, revenue generation beyond just selling more of their own stuff, while in the same kind of period, I'm sure the US, UK, Australia are also, traditional media is struggling. Fairfax, the main newspaper group here, continues to shed editorial staff and journalists. One of the main networks here, Channel 10, it's kind of, like you've got CBS, NBC, ABC, we've got 7, 9, and 10, went into receivership. So I guess, why are we seeing media companies not changing and flexing the other way? Is this kind of a legacy cost-based thing? They're saddled with these big fixed costs, and brands can be more nimble, or what? What do you think's happening there?
I think that has something to do with it, but the bigger issue is that they have to completely change the business model, and it's really hard to do, or they're simply just ignoring the fact that they really need to look at their products and what they're selling and change them entirely. I'll give you an local example here. We have the Cleveland Plain Dealer. That's our paper here in Cleveland, Ohio. And they're really focused on an event strategy. And I've been seeing, as I get my print newspaper on Sundays, which is all I get it on Sunday mornings now, is I'll start going through it. And they are selling all kinds of different events because what dried up? Classified business has dried up. That all went to Craigslist. They're not selling the advertising they used to. Subscriptions are down. And you're looking at, oh my goodness, what? And by the way, competition for content is greater than it's ever been before. So what are they going to do? Well, we're going to have to change the entire business model. And BuzzFeed sees that. So it's interesting that, even look back in 2014, 2015, BuzzFeed had to make a complete change because most of their audience was built on Facebook. And then, of course, Facebook changed their algorithm, took away all their access to their audience. Over the past couple of years, they focus specifically on driving new email names. And so they've got millions of new email subscribers that they can now generate revenue for. And they launched, this is back in 2016, BuzzFeed launched a custom cookbook series from their Tasty brand. And in the first 2 weeks, they sold 100,000 custom print cookbooks at about, between $35 and $45 US. And so you can do the math. This is a multi-million dollar initiative that they launched on a product that how do they know that was going to work? Because they had the Tasty video series and they built an audience directly around this kind of, how do I want to be a chef. I want to create this kind, how do I put this into sort of a different material that I can use in the kitchen? Well, they did these custom cookbooks and they just took off. So, I mean, they're launching products and services, and I think that's where media companies have to go in the United States, whether you're looking at the New York Times, Wall Street Journal. The future of those companies are going to be in product sales. Now, go to the other side, product side. Now, do they have to go to complete to the media side? No, they don't have to, but the opportunity is there. If you look at depending on how you value it, the number one or number two most valuable technology event in the world, it's Dreamforce. It's owned by Salesforce.com. That thing, if you sold that thing, I would almost venture to think that it would be almost $1 billion US in value. They had 150,000 people every year. They've got hundreds of sponsors, multi-millions of dollars in revenue coming in from that. And that's a profitable venture for them. Most people just don't think about it. So here's a software as a service company in sales and marketing that has the most valuable, or maybe second to Consumer Electronics Show in the world. But how is that possible? Because they made it possible because they went that direction. So, I mean, if you mentioned the event phase space before, this is there for any kind of brand that's building an audience where you can launch an in-person event. You could sell advertising and sponsorship. You could, even if you need to do a Kickstarter program and have it be donated, you could do those types of things, as well as sell products and services. And the only thing holding us back right now, because everything is there from a technology standpoint and from a consumer getting this information standpoint and us actually creating subscribers from it. The only thing that's not there is our willingness to go that direction, either because we don't want to, we can't in our organization, or we're not aware of it.
Yeah. And even, I think, is it the New York Times is moving into the conference/education space. And I think it's either the Telegraph or the Times in the UK is launching a wine club. You're getting travel clubs. See, we are seeing it at the periphery, but still, advertising remains their dominant way of thinking. I guess ultimately market forces, Joe, will force people to change, or they'll just get swept away.
Well, it's interesting what's happening. So we just talked about the product brand side. They're hiring media professionals. And on the media side, they need to start hiring product people. Understanding how to build out products from data that we have and the relationships that we have. So it's just interesting that both sides are struggling in their own ways, and they're kind of coming together at the same thing. I mean, is it possible that in the next couple of years that you could be going to events or buying things that you might buy on Amazon.com, but doing it from the New York Times? I think it's absolutely possible. And actually, they probably need to go that direction. The only thing that's really helped New York Times out recently is their subscriptions have been taking off. And that's probably thanks to the new president of the United States right now, because that has really, really taken off. People are supporting a lot of the news entities they didn't before with direct dollars. I don't know how long that's going to last. So they've got a little bit of wind behind them, and they can take that revenue and they can put it into new areas. And it's probably going to be, like you said, like around events, like a new products that we never thought of before. And that's the only thing that's going to be difficult for consumers, and saying, oh, that's interesting that it's New York Times. So you might not see a New York Times do this. You might see, like, for example, they bought Wirecutter, which is an affiliate product site. I think that they bought that about a year ago. So they're generating, $50-100 million just from that effort. And that's a completely different thing that New York Times hasn't done before. So you're going to see more and more of that happen because they have loyal audiences. If you have a loyal audience, loyal, trusted audience will buy anything from you the first time, because they trust you. So we've seen this firsthand with a number of companies we talk about in the book. Once you build that loyal audience, there are a lot of things that are possible that you never thought of before.
So, Joe, it's so interesting, but just let's move back, if we can, to the brand acting more like a media company, or the killing marketing philosophy. So in essence, I think Robert and yourself talking about owned media properties is a key plank or aspect of your marketing, your pseudo advertising, your comms strategy. So, Joe, we've talked about Arrow Electronics, a kind of unsexy, are they B2B or B2C, Arrow?
B2B, business to business.
And they're not, Okay, yeah, so B2B unsexy, if I can call it that.
Yeah,
Sorry,
that's
Arrow.
probably a good way to do it. That's why I love that example too, because we can throw out the Pepsis and the Mondele's and the Crafts, and they're like, oh, they're Unilever, fancy consumer-based companies. But then you get into Arrow Electronics that nobody has heard of unless you're in that space. If you're in that space, you absolutely know who Arrow is.
And that was my question, Joe. Are there any particular sectors where your model or way of thinking kind of works best? Because I think of myself as a consumer, which brands do I buy from? Which brands would I be interested in? Broader, I guess, media properties beyond just info, brochure on their own products. And, you think, movies, media, that's, Netflix type stuff, that's cool. Tech stuff, that's cool. Even cars, I can get my head around. When I start thinking, toothpaste, toilet paper, sellotape, the more mundane products in the suite of things. I mean, is there a sense, can this philosophy work across the board, or is it more suited to certain sectors?
Well, I mean, to be honest, it best works in niche industries like business to business, because you have a defined audience. And once you build that audience, you can really understand what their pain points, their needs, their challenges are, and you can build products around that. I mean, you mentioned cars. So Dennis Publishing out of the UK, traditional publishing company, they had a couple magazines and websites in the automotive area. They purchased a car dealership, an online car dealership, and now they sell I don't have the stats in front of me. They sell something like 20 or 30 cars a day on their website, and it's a media company. And 16% of their revenues are now coming from car sales. So it's interesting that it's like people don't even realize that this is happening. When you talk about things like toothpaste and toothbrushes and toilet paper and things like that, I don't think the opportunity is quite there for that kind of thing. I think it's there for, if you're building an audience, I would look at maybe higher priced, better opportunities than that. But I think that B2B, business to business people listening to this is where I would really think about your acquisition strategy. And like Arrow did, they looked at it 2 years ago. They had a meeting with the executive team and they said, the media companies in our industry, they're hurting. And our ultimate customers are educated by most of what they get to educate themselves is from the media. And if the media companies are hurting and they're educated that way, and these media companies are going to go away because they can't make this evolutionary jump like we're talking about, what are we going to do? It's going to kill our company. So they went out and said, well, we need to go and go purchase these media companies so that we can keep them alive. So that was the number one reason. And then they realized, oh my goodness, there are opportunities here that we never thought of, including, generating more revenue than we thought was possible and doing it as a profit. So if I'm of any kind, I don't care how big you are, if you're any kind of a size and you've got some kind of employee base and you can go in and you're trying to say, okay, well, do we build or buy? I've got no problem with build, but it takes time. It takes sometimes years to build a loyal audience over time. I mean, look at any media company. That's why we used to do 3-year plans. Well, go and say, okay, well, where are our customers hanging out right now? Where are they subscribed? Are they subscribed to this magazine, to this newsletter, to this website? Maybe we should go and purchase them. And because media companies financially are hurting a little bit more than they should or did in the past, maybe there's an opportunity to purchase those media products and become the media company for our industry. So I think that is probably the shorter term thing, Adam, that you're going to start seeing, where you're not going to see this big killing marketing evolution until we get to that 5-10 year mark. But what you're going to see in the next year or two is what Arrow did. You're going to see a lot of, I think, mostly B2B companies, but you're going to see it. I mean, L'Oreal bought makeup.com. I mean, you're going to see more and more of that kind of stuff happening, where you're going to get impatience and they're going to say, well, what do we do? Do we have to build or buy? They're going to say, absolutely. Let's go buy. Let's go become the leading media companies as soon as we can. And we have a couple precedents, and Arrow Electronics is a really good example for that.
Look, Joe, last quick question on killing marketing, then we'll spend a couple of minutes on the pending conference. So I guess this is a topic I think even you and I may have talked about, but certainly one I've talked ad nauseum on the podcast about, that I think most people would agree owning, having a direct relationship with your own customer with no one in the middle is the optimum thing to do, driving people to your own media property, building up email lists, etc. Tick. The two big elephants in the room, Facebook and Google. What's your thinking? Has your thinking evolved, Joe, in terms of the challenge we all face that many people now, the necessity of going via a Facebook, I guess, to commence that relationship with your audience? What's your kind of current thinking on that?
Well, I present a lot on this particular topic, and I always talk about, I feel so bad for all those brands that spent hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars building audiences on Facebook, and now they can't even communicate with them because none of that's going through. I mean, if you have more than, let's say, 10,000 fans on your Facebook page, less than 0.1%, you have less than 0.1% of organic reach to them, which means that if you type in anything and you're trying to reach that audience, Facebook doesn't put it through. Well, why is that? Well, because Facebook wants your advertising dollars. And by the way, we're coming through wonderfully in that area and giving Facebook lots of money to advertise. And actually, in a lot of cases, it's a really good medium to advertise. But what did we learn from that? We learned that you can't build your house on rented land. That's it. Facebook is going to change the rules. Google's going to change the rules. Everybody changes the rules, and they're it's completely in their right to do that. So if you're going to use Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, LinkedIn, any of the other properties, that's fine. But you have to realize that we're playing by somebody else's rules there. And ultimately right now, and I don't know if this is going to be the case, Adam, and in 5 years, 10 years, but right now, the best means that we have is email subscription. So, or let's say you have your own standalone app, anywhere that you can control, that you can get their own information, and they've opted in to receiving communication from you. So I would say that put more of your eggs in your email marketing basket, in your subscription basket, and less in your social basket. And I think a lot of the cases, what I'm seeing from social is it's a great customer service channel. Twitter, we've seen that happen firsthand. Facebook, it's great for if somebody wants to message you on your Facebook page and get instantaneous response. That's fantastic for customer service. Not so good for building audiences because we don't have control over those audiences. So that's all I would say about, and whether it's Google or it's Facebook or it's LinkedIn or whatever, basically all of it is the same to me because of the fact that they control it and they don't really care about you building your own audience on their platform. They care about revenues. And what they're going to do is they're going to try to create every opportunity for them to sell advertising and to not get your organic content through so that you have to, figure something else out. And that something else is probably more around email than social.
Yeah. Now, look, Joe, I totally agree on the sort of put your megaphone away on social and listen and response, primary use cases for enterprises in those platforms, and agree it's move very much to a paid medium beyond that. So, look, Joe, thank you very much for talking about killing marketing. It would be remiss of me, before I let you go, talk to us a bit about Content Marketing World 2017, which is coming up in just over a week.
Coming up, depending on when you release this, I'll probably be there on site. So Content Marketing World 2017, it's our 7th Content Marketing World event. I mean, we started in 2011. We were hoping for 100 people to come to Cleveland, Ohio. We ended up getting 600 delegates that year. This year will be around 4,000 delegates from over 70 countries. I think we have something like 150 sessions, 200 speakers. It's just, if content marketing has a holiday, it's Content Marketing World Week. And it's, this year we've got Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who's one of our keynotes, Casey Neistat, big YouTuber, Linda Boff, Chief Marketing Officer from General Electric, and a lot of other smart people. And, and of course I'll be talking about killing marketing. I've got my own little keynote that I'll be talking about this change that we've talked about and what we need to do about it and some of the opportunities there, because I really do believe if you look at the content marketing industry right now, I think we've stalled a little bit. I think everybody's sort of figured out, they can do the content creation and distribution thing, but because organic doesn't work quite as well as it used to, and because social and content doesn't work as well as it used to, people are like, well, what now? And I think what now is kind of what we've talked about. So I'm super looking forward to it. I see a lot of friends from all over the world come in that I never get to see. So it's more of a party than for me than anything else. But really, there's a lot for everyone, a lot of learning. But we like to have a good time there as well. Our opening receptions at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We've got 80s night dance party, all kinds of crazy stuff going on. But more than anything else, it's to network with people that are going through the same challenges that you are. We're not alone. We're in this together, and it's a great support group.
I think last year, Joe, was it more than 3,500 people you had at the
conference? We had about 3,500 last year. We should eclipse that this year, and get close to that 4. So good, solid growth. And, I'd love it to be 10, but I think that because it's a business to business event and we're going up against the dream forces of the world, like we talked about, that could throw the kind of money that we can't at it. But I think that, 7th year from going from 0 to 4,000 is pretty good. I'll absolutely take it. And I'd love to see so many people in my hometown of Cleveland, Ohio. We like to show them a good time. And, like a lot of people, I remember, Craig Hodges used to work at King Content. He came in for Content Marketing World, for the first time, and he flew over lake. We're right on Lake Erie. And he's like, I thought you guys were like in the middle of the United States in the Midwest, like Kansas. And it's like, you actually are on a body of water like Sydney is. I'm like, yeah, believe it or not. Yeah, we do have water in the Cleveland area. It was funny.
So you get a good contingent of Aussies over there? You
know what? We usually get around 20 to 25 that make the trip. I haven't checked this year. We'll see if there's more. There should be more, depending. But yeah, we always see a good group, friends like Jonathan Crossfield, Sarah Mitchell in Perth always makes the way over here. And so, yeah, we used to do Content Marketing World Sydney that we did in 2013 and 2014. But we made the decision that, hey, let's focus on the one big show. We need an office in Australia if we're going to really make that work. There's lots of other events in Australia for marketers there, but we really wanted to focus on what could we be the best in the world at. We thought we could do that with the North America show.
Joe, fantastic stuff. Look, congratulations on the continued growth in Content Marketing World. Congrats to Robert and yourself on the launch of the new book, Killing Marketing, which, as you said, by the time this podcast is published, will basically be out on Amazon. So, Joe, before I let you go, where do you want to send people that want to learn a bit more about, I guess, both the book and the conference?
So, yeah, the book is killingmarketing.com. You can get a free chapter of the introduction. You can get all the links and places where to buy it. There's audio. We just recorded the audiobook too. So you get ebook, print, or audiobook. Anything on me and my speaking and what I'm doing, it's joepulizzi.com, Pulizzi. And then anything on the event or Content Marketing Institute, just go to contentmarketinginstitute.com. And of course, we have the event every September, but there's lots of things. We put out a piece of content every day. We have a magazine called Chief Content Officer. If you need education and training around the practice of content marketing, that's what our mission is, and that's all we do.
Joe, thank you so much for squeezing me in advance of the conference. Much appreciated.
Anytime, my friend. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
There we go, ladies and gents. Mr. Joe Pulizzi back on the EchoJunction podcast for a third time. Always great value to have Joe on. He's always very generous with his time, as you could see by squeezing in this conversation just a week before his big Content Marketing World event. So hope you took a lot out of the conversation. And please do check out Joe's new book, Killing Marketing. Episode number 122 coming to a close. Ladies and gents, thanks for your continued support of this podcast. Had some fantastic guests on in 2017 already and some more amazing guests to come. So if you haven't yet subscribed on iTunes, please do head over there to make sure you never miss an episode of the EchoJunction podcast. Thank you so much for your support, and I look forward to seeing you on a future podcast episode.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, subscribe on iTunes, where you can also leave a review. Be social, and we'll see you again next week.